Hi, everybody, and welcome to a tutorial for character creation in the Backwater Southern Gothic Core tabletop role-playing game and the Backbone game system. My name is Asa. I'm one of the creators for Backwards Games, which includes the Backwater game and the Backbone game system. And this is Alex, my co-creator. Today, Alex and I are going to be walking through how he created one of his signature characters, Swifty, whom you might have seen on a couple of different actual plays that Alex has done over the last year or so. And while we do that, we're just going to go through each of the steps and explain how character creation works in the system so that some of you can use it as a guide, or just in case you're interested in how Swifty as a character was created. Alex, I know that you like to start with character concepts and then go through the steps along the way and see how those steps can enhance it, or what the bounds might be for that character. So why don't you go ahead and give us a really short description here of Swifty and how you came up with this concept.
So despite Backwater not being necessarily a combat heavy game, I decided I wanted to play a character who is pretty good at killing things to start. And so Swifty, as I envisioned him, is a young warden, pretty new to the organization, like 21. Swifty's pronouns are he, him. And my idea was that Swifty was from a family that got massacred mysteriously and was saved by the Wardens. And he was brought to New Orleans, where he was adopted by a pretty wealthy family. They tutored him, gave him a good education, a good upbringing, but he was a rebel, didn't really like their style. They were pretty cold and distant. And so he spent a lot of his youth as a kind of juvenile delinquent, we'll say, getting into trouble, reflecting badly on the family. And at one point, he got himself into such a little scuffle that he was probably going to get killed by some local street gangs, but he was again saved by the passing Wardens. And this clicked something in him, made him reform his ways and sort of start hero worshiping the Wardens and really like wanting to be one, so that he decided, when he turned 18, he enlisted. His family was upset about this because the Wardens, while important, are not seen as particularly prestigious or wealthy, probably more of a lateral move to a family that wants to continue rising up. So they cut him off. They said, you don't have access to the family money if you're going to be embarrassing us this way. And all of the money that we invested in your education, you're going to need to pay us back. So Swifty, taking that concept and then taking a concept of someone who's really good at killing things, I decided that I wanted Swifty to be sort of this young, enthusiastic member of the Wardens who took on very dangerous assignments so that he could get the extra hazard pay to pay his family back, and in doing so had learned very quickly about a lot of the monsters and threats that can be found in the Backwater ward. And though he's young, he has this sort of knowledge of how to kill things, how to survive, that sort of thing.
And I think a lot of people's favorite thing about Swifty is he's so young and enthusiastic about being a warden that he's extremely by the books. He knows the warden's manual back and forth, and he has his own appendices for it, which are bigger than the actual manual itself. And I know that's at least what a lot of people we've played with or watch your actual plays have commented on too. So it makes for a really fun character. The first step in creating Swifty, then, if we're following the core rulebook or the quick start guide, would be to determine your characteristics. And there are 8 characteristics. They're aptitude, which is finesse and dexterity, athleticism, your physical power and speed, charisma, logic, wisdom, size, stamina, and willpower. And the way that it works for characteristics is a point buy system. All of them begin at -1. And then from there, you can distribute up to 13 points. You can put them in whichever skills or whichever characteristics you want, but those characteristics cannot be greater than 2 or less than -1. And that just ensures that you're within a range where your character isn't way too good at one thing or way too bad at something too. So it's about creating even and balanced characters here. So Alex, what did you end up distributing for the characteristics for Swifty?
So to start, I wanted to make sure that Swifty was good at fighting. He's got a lot of, or I foresaw him as having a couple different weapons that he was skilled using, both ranged and melee, and that meant bumping both aptitude and athletics up to 2, because those are the 2 skills tied with melee and ranged. So I spent three points each to raise aptitude and athletics to 3. And then my other thought was I wanted Swifty to be a pretty good all-around character. I didn't see him as having any particular like glaring weaknesses. And so I spent 6 points to raise everything else up to a 0. And then my final thought was that Swifty did have access to some skilled tutors, a library. My charisma is not -0. And so, logic is a sort of accumulated knowledge of stuff. And I figured that given his background, he did have a reasonable amount of education and whatnot. So I bumped his logic up to 1.
Great. So in total, you ended up spending 13 skill points here. So 3 for aptitude, another 3 for athleticism, that's 6. We have 7 to get up to 0 for charisma, 8, 9, 10, and 11 for wisdom, size, stamina, willpower, and then 2 more to bump logic up to 1 here. So that's 13 of those. You spent all 13 of those points for your characteristics. That's great. The second step here is going to be to determine your origins. And the reason why that's a second step is because it can actually influence some of the characteristic scores that you have right here before you begin calculating some of your other scores. So there are a couple of different origins available in the Quick Start Guide and core rulebook, depending on what you have. These origins determine where you are originally from and help situate your character within the setting. So if you already have a character concept, you can automatically go with that, or you can use this part to help flesh out your character and place and situate them within the actual Backwater universe. So you could be from Backwater from a certain territory, like the Jackson territory, Fayette territory, or Shreve territory. You could be from different parts of the American lands, including the Gulf Ward, the Heartlands, and Tidewater, or you could be a new American character who is a wandering, part of a wandering self-governing group in the outskirts there. So Swifty, I think, is from the outskirts originally. Is that right, Alex? Why did you choose the outskirts here?
Right. So I figured when I was building Swifty, I figured there are 2 options. He can either be from the outskirts, or he can be from Jackson territory in the Backwater Ward, which is where New Orleans is. And at the end of the day, I wanted Swifty to have a little bit of an outsider status. Like, his family never really integrated him into the unit, even though he has experience with Backwater society, New Orleans society. It's from a little bit of a step, a little bit of a reserve. And so I ended up saying that because his family cuts him off and because they don't really integrate him, that the outskirts made more sense, that his formative years were spent there. So he picked up the outskirts vulgar dialect, which sets him apart as an outsider already. And then because he is not currently wealthy, some of his motivation is in fact to acquire money so he can survive. I didn't see, Jackson territory, you can be either working class or highborn. And because of his family status, he would have been highborn, but that just didn't feel right. And so I ended up picking outskirts for the dialect and for the family fortune of lowborn, which will come in a second.
Yeah, so I'm going ahead and throwing these into the character sheet here. So your dialect then is Wastelander, which helps place you as this outsider to Backwater Ward, and your fortune is going to be lowborn. And both of these things will come up a little bit later on during character creation process, primarily your family fortune here. The other thing that's part of your origin or determined by your origin is you get to increase one of your stats. And it's not super prescriptive. It gives you a list of 4 that you can choose from. If you're from the outskirts, you can choose either your athleticism, wisdom, stamina, or willpower to increase by 1. Which one of those would you like to increase for Swifty?
So initially my thought was I'm going to bump athletics to 3 because, you know, Swift, like that would place Swifty at like a very high level of human ability. But then I felt that's a little min-maxy, and, you know, Swifty being young, I felt like maybe he hasn't grown into his full or final Swifty form. But I did want him to be a survivor. I wanted him to have some skills that you wouldn't necessarily see in like a typical sort of brute or guy who's just like out to kill stuff. I want Swift to be a little more well-rounded. And so I figured that he's out there, he's seeing, you know, these monsters. There's this survivability thing again that I'm thinking about. And so I ended up bumping up wisdom for just to get a little more in terms of like, he is aware of his surroundings. He can see, you know, he can track things, you know, or see tracks. Like it's sort of this outdoor or outside of civilization, quote unquote, skill that I think, or characteristic that I think rounds him out a bit and makes sense for what he does.
Yeah, definitely. And so that is everything for the origin step, which is again the second step here. The third step is going to be to determine the attributes for Swifty. If you're using the Roll20 character sheet, a lot of these are going to be calculated automatically, but this is one of the steps that involves a bit of math here. So bear with us. There are 4 basic attributes that all characters have. They are vigilance, build, intuition, and reflex. Vigilance is your passive awareness. Build is how you can use your strength and size. Intuition is, well, it's your intuition and insight, your ability to detect whether or not people are lying or which direction to go in certain cases, whether or not something is off about somebody. And then there's reflex, which is how quick you are, whether or not you can dodge attacks. These attributes, these 4 basic attributes in particular, each have 2 stats. One of them is the score, and the score is what people roll against. That's the big one. So if I'm the game master and I want a character to sneak past you, I would have them roll against your vigilance score. That way, I don't need to have you make a competing roll or anything like that. I can just do that sneakily on the side. So it's a great tool for the game master. And then on the other hand, it also has a modifier. That's a small number over here, the +0 in this instance for vigilance. And that would be used for a couple of things. I might ask somebody to make a vigilance roll. In that case, they add their modifier to a d20. Vigilance is also used for turn order. So in that instance, you would roll a d20 +0, and that would help you determine what order you'd be taking when you enter combat or something along those lines, for example. If you're using the Roll20 sheet, these calculate automatically, but just to show you quickly how that works, vigilance is calculated by adding your logic and willpower modifiers to 10. And for Swifty, his logic is +1, his willpower is 0. So if we add those to 10, it equals 11, and that's his score for vigilance. Build is going to be your size and stamina added to 10. Intuition is your charisma and wisdom added to 10. And reflex is your athleticism and aptitude added to 10. So these all sort of balance each other out. If you're good at one of these things, you're probably going to be a little bit worse at another one. After you calculate those scores, you should calculate the modifiers too. And it's pretty simple to calculate them. You just subtract 11 from them. So if your vigilance score is 11, the modifier is going to be 0. 11 minus 11 is 0. If we look at Swifty's reflex, it's 14. Well, if we subtract 11 from it, his modifier is equal to +3. And just to show a negative here, Swifty only has a 10 for build, which isn't too bad, but you subtract 11 from it, that means he has a -1 modifier to any build rolls that he might make.
Listen, Swifty didn't have a lot of nutrition in his earliest days, so he's not that big. It's not his fault.
It fits the character. So those are your basic attributes. And for special attributes, those include health points and resolve points. Health points help determine how much damage you can take, how resistant you are to physical conditions and injuries. Your health is going to be equal to 10 plus your stamina modifier. So for Swifty, that's going to be 10 plus 0, and that's equal to 10. And your resolve is going to be equal to 11 plus your willpower. And for Swifty, that's going to be 11 plus 0, and that equals 11. Luck value, it doesn't necessarily matter which one you pick, but down the road, if a game master asks you to make a luck roll, so for example, if you're walking down an abandoned hallway when suddenly you're attacked and you don't have a weapon, you can say, are there any, bricks around that I can use as a weapon? The game master might feel sympathetic and say, make me a luck roll and see. When you make one of those luck rolls, you roll a d20 and you hope that you roll your luck value, which can be either an even number or an odd number. So Swifty, what did you end up picking?
Swifty is by the book, and I don't know, even felt more by the book, so I picked even.
Okay. And even is what we've clicked here for that luck roll. So then if you were to make a luck roll and you roll a d20 and you roll an even number, you would succeed. And if you roll an odd number, you would fail. In this sample here, you rolled a 14, which is equal to an even number. So that would be a success in gameplay. There's
Can I
also
bank that for our next game?
Nope. Yeah.
Damn it.
You can't bank it. Up next are movement and sprint, and then item slots, and then we'll move on to the next step here. But movement is how much you can move in your movement turn phase or within a turn. That is calculated as 20 plus your athleticism modifier multiplied by 5. So your athleticism is 2 times 5 is 10. And if we added that to 20, stick up your 30 fingers here, that would be, your movement score over here. And again, you can see the Roll20 character sheet automatically calculates this for you. Sprint is how much you can move if you use a blitz action to sprint on your turn. So it's just some bonus that you can use in your action turn phase or in your turn. Your sprint speed is calculated by multiplying athleticism by 5 again, and then adding it to 10. So for Swifty, that would be his athleticism, which is 2, multiplied by 5 is 10. And then you add that to 10, and you get 20. So that's how those are calculated.
If you are ever in a situation, for example, where you're in a grain silo that's been rigged with explosive gunpowder kegs, being able to move 50 feet a turn can make the difference between life and life with broken ankles.
And if you want to see how it plays out, you can check the All Kings episodes with Percentile Vice, in which that may or may not have happened.
No spoilers.
No spoilers there, but you might want to check out the third of 4 episodes in All Kings, in which Swifty is a character as well. The last last attribute that I'd like to share with you is item slots. And this just determines how much gear that you can carry at a time. That is equal to one of 2 calculations, whichever one is going to be greater for your character, either your size modifier plus 3 or your size and athleticism plus 1. And that just helps make sure that you have a good minimum number of item slots by picking the greater of those. So it's meant to help characters. For Swifty, size plus 3 is going to equal 3. That's 0 plus 3 is 3. Size plus athleticism is 0 plus 2 plus 1 is 3. So in both cases, doesn't matter. Swifty is going to end up with 3 item slots. You can add that by your gear section of your character sheet.
And the item slots, to be clear, are things separate from like weapons and ammo and armor.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. So every character can have up to 3 equipped weapons for free, which is just nice because every character is going to need to be able to have a weapon. So this is more like what you got on your person, what's strapped into your belt, for example. So every character can have 3 equipped weapons for free. They can have 2 ammo containers equipped for free and 1 piece of armor. But anything else that you want to carry, whether or not it's some sort of equipment kit, or maybe you want to carry the special item that you have, you will want to put that in your equipped gear.
Could I equip a fourth weapon? Use it so I get 3 weapons for free. I can use other slots to equip extra weapons if I want to be just like a walking arsenal, right?
Oh yeah, totally. And that can be helpful too, because some of the other characters that you play with might have fewer item slots. So you build a character with a bunch of item slots. That can be handy because you cannot get to your stored gear easily. You need to take 15 minutes of real time to dig through your stored gear within the game. So if you're in the middle of combat and you lose a weapon, well, you got a friend who's like a pack mule over here. He can just toss you a weapon, or they can just toss you a weapon, and you can use that in combat instead. So if you have a lot of item slots, it can be really useful for your teammates too. So great questions. So those are the main special attributes I like to cover. Adrenaline points, which are special, what you might call narrative currency. They start at 0 unless your game master wants to give you some extra ones here. And then your armor score always starts at 0, but when you buy gear later on, it can increase it. And armor score just helps reduce damage. It soaks damage for you. Up next is step number 4, and these are the character archetypes. Depending on what game you're playing in, there can be different archetypes, but in Backwater, there are 4. There's a Savant, Seeker, Seer, and Slayer. Savants are really good at skills. They can have a bunch of variety of skills. Even if they don't have bonuses in those skills or proficiencies, they can still be good at them. That's what their special abilities are. Seekers can be a variety of things. They might be criminals or they might be explorers, but they're people who are really good at engaging with their environment, avoiding traps. Maybe they get to jump in combat, those sorts of things. Seers tend to have magical abilities in this game, and those are some of the cool starting bonuses that they start off with, and they get access to abilities later on, more magic abilities than other characters might. And then Slayers tend to be combat oriented. They can specialize in different types of combat. They can be a tactician, they can be a range specialist, they can be a combat specialist, or they can be a mishmash of those things. That tends to be what they're good at here. So, Alex, what did you choose for Swifty of these character archetypes?
So because I wanted a character who was good at killing stuff, Slayer was the obvious choice. So that is Swifty is a Slayer, and that was a no-brainer.
Yeah, and that means that as a Slayer, you get to start with a default ability, which is going to be a favorite weapon that you have. And you don't have that weapon yet, but maybe you already have an idea or concept for it. But when we get to that item buying process, that's where you can pick it. And that favorite weapon will give you a special bond with it. You inflict an additional 1 damage with that weapon when you use it. So just helps create a little bit of a damage bonus here. And then if you're using the core rulebook, there are a couple of different abilities that you can select for your second one. You get to pick from them. The quick start guide is actually only going to supply one of those abilities. So you have to buy the core rulebook in order to get access to all of them here. For Swifty, I think when you originally created Swifty, you ended up going with an ability that's not listed in the quick start guide. It is Rebut.
Yes.
For Rebut, that's where you use the defend action. And if the target misses an attack against you, you get to make a melee attack as a counter against them. So in other words, if you're in combat and you use this defend action, which makes it more likely that they're going to miss you, then you get to then take a melee attack against them if they miss. So it's just like a way of getting an extra attack in while being defensive.
Yeah, and since survivability was a priority, I felt that Swifty is probably going to be on the front lines of things, and I wanted to give him. Right, I liked the idea of him being able to like defend a place while his comrades are running away or being shooting, so that he could riposte as necessary, but not take a bunch of damage, immediately.
And I'm going to throw these in your character sheet here. You can put them in the ability section, which in a PDF character sheets can be on the back side. In the Roll20 sheet, it's, it's all one page here, but it's under the abilities section. And I'll just paste what some of those abilities look like in here. And we can get going. Oops. And I'll come back and type in the description for rebut in a second. So that is your character archetype. That is the entirety of step 4. Step 5 is choosing an ideal. And an ideal is sort of your character's beliefs and values. It also helps determine their typical skill set and credit. And a warden can have one of 12 ideals. In the quick start guide, there are only 5 that are going to be listed among them. But in the full rule book, there are going to be 12 that you can pick from. And each provide a little description about what is unique about them. So if you're looking in the full rule book, there's going to be compassion, creativity, crime, discovery, hedonism, industry, justice, knowledge, serenity, spirituality, valor, and wealth. So those are the options that you can choose from. What did you end up picking for Swifty and why?
So amusingly enough, in the book, it says that Slayer ideals typically gravitate around justice, valor, and wealth. And those were the 3 that I independently was sort of trying to choose between for Swifty. Wealth, just because he is, trying to acquire some. Justice, because of his zealous application of the manual. And valor, because he is a brave individual who is willing to go out and kill scary things to protect people. Which could also, I could make an argument for compassion, but I don't think that quite fits. I ended up throwing wealth out immediately because you start with a pretty good credit rating as a warden for wealth, and that's not where I saw Swifty. And at the end of the day, I picked valor, even though I felt justice might be a little more correct, but valor gives you melee and ranged as skills that are within your wheelhouse that only cost 1 point to buy, so it's easier to get good at those things. And I figured that those are the things that Swifty is to start pretty darn good at. And so I picked valor because I also see him as being like sort of a man of action despite his love of the rules and paperwork, because the crazier shit that you get up to, the more paperwork you have to fill out, and both of those things are exciting.
Yeah, and this is your ideals are going to determine things that are going to come up later in your character creation process here as well. So valor, easily induced in a conflict, constantly searching for your newest conquest. Like Alex said, always looking to take on these harder assignments for Swifty. That credit, the base is going to be 9 plus charisma. So we can type that in for now if we'd like to, but some of these things can change. So 9 plus charisma for Swifty is going to be 9. Skill points is going to be 12 plus logic, which for Swifty is 1, and athleticism, which is 2. So 12 plus 1 plus 2 is going to equal 15. And we'll put that here for skill points. And then free skills, we'll come back to these, but Swifty can pick any type of language ability as a free skill, lore strategy as a free skill. And then familiar skills, when he ends up picking skills later on, these are just going to be cheaper for him. And this is all listed in the core rulebook when we get to that later step as well. But they're previewed here in case that ends up influencing your decisions, if you would like to know those. For Swifty, these skills are going to be easier for him to acquire. That's a craft skill, hide, sneak, stunt, melee, and ranged. And valor is the only one of these skills that include both the melee and range skill. So it tends to be pretty common among slayers who want to make sure that they're good in combat. So the 6th step here, and we're a little over halfway now, is to choose your family fortune. And Swifty chose that in an earlier step, but now we can adjust some of the things that were determined by ideals. So Swifty ended up being from the outskirts and selected lowborn as the family fortune. And that means that it's going to adjust some of his stats. If you're lowborn, you're actually going to get a bonus of 2 skill points, and then your credit is going to be subtracted by 2. So your family fortune is going to affect your skill points and credit. So we can bump Swifty skill points up to 17. We're going to use those to buy skill proficiencies in a second. And it's going to subtract his credit all the way down to 7, which is very low. Means he probably won't be able to buy as much gear here. But those are some of the bounds you work within for your character concept. And then up next is adding traits. And the reason why this comes up before a few other items here before you actually start buying skills and stuff is because it can still affect your skill points. It can affect your credit and can affect how many skills even that you end up buying in that skill buy process. So what traits did you end up picking for Swifty, and how do they relate to his character?
So I ended up doing 2 favorable traits and 1 unfavorable trait, if I remember correctly. So the favorable traits I took were tough and brave, just for survivability, but I also felt like this, Swifty is a character who is divined by his ability to deal with stuff. And tough and brave increase both your resolve and your health by 2. So just giving him a little bit more, the ability to shrug off a little bit more than your typical person. And then for unfavorable traits, really leaning into Swifty being cut off from his family fortune, I took indebted, which decreases your credit by 1. So Swifty is truly poor.
Yeah. And did you take any other unfavorable traits, or is that the only one?
Nope, that's the only one. So I ended up spending 1 skill point total to get that balance.
Yeah. So whenever you take a favorable skill trait, you would decrease a skill point. And for unfavorable traits, you can if you take one of those on, you get a skill point here. So that can balance it out. And you can take up to 2 of each, 2 unfavorable traits or 2 favorable traits. So Alex hit the max for favorable traits, but only picked 1 unfavorable trait. They end up balancing out relatively, although he did take 1 more favorable trait, so he's going to lose a skill point. We'll adjust that up top here. So he now goes into the skill buy process with 16 skill points. I'm also going to make the adjustments here that show up in his traits. So his credit is going to decrease by 1. So now he has 6 for his credit. His health points and resolve points are both going to increase by 2. So that's going to put him at 12 health points and 13 resolve points. And that's the 7th step in the character creation process.
#worth it.
And those traits are great because they can really contribute to your ideas for a character, or again, help you flesh out that character and what they're good at or bad at. The 8th step is spending skill points. And again, depending on your ideal, you're going to get access to a couple of free skills, and then you're going to be able to get some skills cheaper. So just to go over how this works, every ideal comes with free skills. Those are skills in which you automatically get a +2 proficiency bonus in. So we'll start with those for Swifty, who have the Valor ideal. That means you can have any type of language with +2, and you'll get lore strategy +2 here. So what type of language would you like to pick here for Swifty?
So I figured because Swifty spent many years with a New Orleans tutor, he ended up getting Backwater.
Okay.
Backwater language.
Yeah, and Backwater here is a dialect, so it's not a foreign language or anything, but just means that if Swifty wants to, he can really fake a good Backwater dialect. And you notice that for both of these skills, I put them at +2. So that's what you do with a free skill here. That automatically adjusts it to +2.
And so like having Backwater as a language is it's not just affecting an accent, but it's also like local forgetting the word, local idioms, that sort of thing, like being able to understand, perhaps
Yeah.
something that an outsider wouldn't necessarily get because you don't have the cultural context or whatever. Could you quick go over what lore strategy does for me?
Yeah. Lore strategy has a couple of different things, but lore specialty skills are things related to your knowledge. So some other categories can be lore religion or lore nature, and you can use those to perhaps glean information about a particular subject in gameplay without researching in a book or researching in a library. So those can be really useful ways to get background information or context that help your characters make decisions, or even maybe gain a best of 2 modifier on a roll for something that they're about to do. Lore strategy is about strategies and tactics related to combat and other types of scenarios. So you could use lore strategy as a way to set up an ambush. So a character can make that roll, and based off the information that they get, they might realize, oh, it's actually better if we set up on this side of the road for XYZ reason. And maybe that will give them a best of 2 modifier when they're making a hide roll. So that's one of the things. But you can also use lore strategy in some different ways. There's a special option when you're in turn order where you can strategize, and it can allow you to change your current position within the turn order based on your lore strategy roll. So you might be last in the turn order, but you want to make sure that for the next round you get to go earlier on. You can use your turn then to make that lore strategy roll to jump ahead in that turn order. So yeah, it can be really useful if you are playing a combat-oriented character. Great. There are also familiar skills. And the reason why familiar skills are important is because you're going to end up taking all of your skill points that you have and using them to purchase proficiencies at certain skills. And I think there are something like 22 different basic skills within the Backbone game system here that you can pick from. So it's meant to allow you to play different types of games, but also create more diverse characters with diverse interests and specialties even. So you can be really good at different things in different scenarios. Familiar skills only cost 1 skill point per level when you buy them. Unfamiliar skills, so any skills that are not familiar for you, are going to cost 2 skill points. So that's a difference. It's half the price, half the cost for familiar skills. And for Valor, your skill point or your familiar skills are going to be any of the craft skills: hide, sneak, stunt, melee, and range. So these options are only going to cost 1 skill point instead of 2. So what did you end up picking for Swifty here in terms of your skills? You have 16 skill points that you can spend.
Right. So there is a max that first level characters can get. Remind me what that is.
Yeah, so first level characters have a max where they cannot purchase a 3rd proficiency level, which would be up to +2 at that point in time, unless in the last step they took the expert trait, which allows you to spend more than that. So you cannot have more than +1 starting out in these skills unless you pick the expert trait.
All right. So since I didn't pick the expert trait, the most I can assign to any one of these skills is 2 skill points.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So I spent 2 each on melee and ranged to bring me up to +1.
Okay.
So that's 4 skill points. So stunt is also like the ability to do stuff in combat, right?
Mhm.
That's like, tripping people or disarming them or what. And that felt important, like as a thing that Swifty can do. So I put 2 points into stunt. Could you describe the difference between sneak and hide?
Yeah. So Sneaking is movement in a really quiet way, and hiding is positioning yourself in a way that you are not being seen. So if you're just trying to hide from someone in an ambush, you would use the hide roll. That's more about using your wisdom in order to figure that out. But sneak is about using your athletic abilities in order to get from point A to point B without somebody noticing you.
Okay, so I don't know that Swifty is great at hiding just because of his background. Like, I assume that something happened in the when the warden saved him the second time, that like maybe he wasn't hidden properly. But I do see him having some skill in navigating quietly and avoiding notice. So I'll put 2 points into sneak.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm going to take anything else in my core skills. So at this point, I'm going to be putting things into non-core skills, which means they're going to cost 2 points each.
Yep.
So I do think Swifty has the ability to, when he's looking around, to like make judgments about what is important and what is not important in a situation. So I think search and assess work together in that way. And so I think I'm going to put 4 points, so two skill ranks, 4 points in search.
Okay.
I'm going to put a single point in assess, which means 2 points.
Mm-hmm. You got 2 more skill points left.
Yep. And that, so I think that Swifty does have the ability, once he's got all of this information, to come to a conclusion with it. So I'll throw my last 2 points in deduce.
Okay. And the other important thing to note here is that just because you don't have a proficiency in a skill does not mean you can't use it. You can use any of the skills at any point in time. Just know, because you don't have that proficiency, you start with a -1 modifier to it, which isn't all that bad. Just decreases the likeliness that you'll be able to complete it.
Actually, hold on. I'm sorry. I also see survive as an important one. So I think I'm going to take 2 out of search and put 1 in survive.
Yeah. So search was, yeah, one that you had already bought. So gotcha. Yep. And then survive. Great.
Yes.
So those are your skill points now that they've been distributed. The next step here is going to be step number 9, calculating your coin. And we're going to use that then to buy some gear here. We already adjusted your coin as you went through, but if you recall, your credit for valor was 9 plus charisma, which left you at 9. You're lowborn, so you lost 2 more credit points, and then you took indebted. So I love how you're really just buying into the character here. So that brings you all the way down to 6 credit. Well, 6 credit to calculate your coin is going to be 6 times 100. So you are beginning with 600 coin, which is not a lot compared to what some other characters get, because some of the things that you might want to buy for your warden equipment is going to be a bit expensive. All characters begin with some level of bonus. And for you, with 6 to 9, with credit falling within the 6 to 9 range, you get 1 warden kit of your choice. You can pick any of the items on that list in your core rulebook. Warden kits are things that include just a collection of basic gear. They allow you to hold multiple items all at once in this cool little warden kit that you can improvise with. It could be anything from like a fishing rod to a candle or a piece of chalk, things that you might end up using in gameplay but are sort of miscellaneous items. So what type of warden kit did you pick and what's in it?
So there are a couple different options, and the 2 that I ended up debating between were either the explorer's kit or the gendarme's kit. And the gendarme kit made sense just because Swifty is so very like by the book. It comes with a book, criminal law, which that's very appealing. But at the end of the day, I went with the explorer's kit because I also foresaw Swifty as being more out in the, in the backwater natures, trying to survive. So The explorer's kit has a bedroll, a canteen, a compass, flint and steel, rain clothes, rope, a stim brew, and a torch. And that just felt like, yeah, this is for roughing it. You know, this is for when you're out in the bayou, when you don't have a house, you know, a roof over your head, which is something that Swifty deals with on a regular basis. And so that felt like it fit just a little bit more, because the gendarme's kit has the book, a bucket, chalk, a lantern, manacles, oil canister, rain clothes, and rope. And the book was really the thing. So taking an entire kit just to get the book didn't feel like the best use of the one thing that Swifty has as a bonus.
And if Swifty had more money, he could always buy himself a book, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. Yeah, so this is your free item that you get to start with based off of your bonus. And then you get to use the rest of your 600 coin to buy anything you want in the next step here. But I should add that before we move on, your credit also determines the type of clothes that you wear, which can be really impactful in other situations. So like if you have less money and you have poorer quality clothes, it's going to be harder for you to sneak into like a mask with the elite people in the Lake District, for example. Swifty, your credit is less than 9 considerably. That means that your street clothes are worn. You still have a nice warden's uniform, but the street clothes that you would wear if you are not wearing your uniform are going to be really tattered here.
I assume that Swifty's warden uniform is also just like a little threadbare. He does his best, but like he can't afford another warden outfit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then the final thing that's going to be in your core rule book is you also get a badge, your warden badge, based on the area where you're from. So it distinguishes whether or not you're sort of a local or not. And in the core rule book, we'd be throwing that on here too. But that badge is displayed at all times when you are a warden. That helps identify you as law, but also people might treat you a little bit differently because of it, and not always in a good way. So now moving on to step 10, which is going to be picking items. A lot of people can spend a lot of time in here, which can be, for some people, a lot of fun, picking the little bits of gear that they end up having, or their animal companions, which is everybody's favorite. Swifty, what sort of things do you end up buying with your 600 coin?
So as fun as an animal companion is, they're also expensive, and Swifty can't afford to feed an animal. So my major thoughts were to look at his weapons, because he is a slayer, and since he's good with both melee and ranged, I wanted to make sure that he had access to both of those options. So I started with ranged, and there are a lot of different guns, but also expensive. And I also figured that Swifty, coming from the background that he does, guns are expensive, ammunition is expensive. So I thought he has fallen back on a longbow, and that is his like signature weapon as well. I assume that most people in New Orleans aren't used to seeing someone with a longbow walking around, and so that's also just another like little mark of his outsider status, that he's got this sort of like really old-fashioned weapon on him.
I love it. And you said it's your signature weapon. You've got that Slayer ability, favorite weapon. So is that the one you're going to use for your favorite weapon too?
Yep, that's going to be my
favorite weapon.
My favorite.
So you get a +1 damage for that. And so I'll add that in there. You'd put that on your character sheet. And then let's see, your range is 60. I'm just adding all these things in here. And it's quiet too, so it doesn't make a bang. That means if you shoot it well hidden, it's not going to reveal your location so long as you roll above a certain number. Like if you fail, the arrow might go astray and might alert people to your position. But it's so this quiet property is sort of an added bonus there. What else did you end up grabbing then? So a longbow is going to need some arrows. So how are you setting that up?
Yep. So I got myself a quiver, which is 50 coin.
Mm-hmm.
And that holds up to 30 arrows, and I'm pretty sure I couldn't afford all 30 arrows, so I think I ended up taking 15, which is 13 coin.
Okay. So we'll put 15 here, arrows. Great. So far you spent 50, you said 50 on the quiver, plus 13, so that's 63 coin that you've spent. And then you spent another 220 on your longbow. You can see how this is adding up pretty quick. That's 283 coins subtracted from your 600 already, which brings you to 300 and what are we at here? 317 coin left, I think. Hopefully I'm doing the math right. It'd be embarrassing in a recording.
I think you're correct.
Okay. I lost track of the numbers while I was doing the calculation. Yeah, what else did he end up getting?
So I also wanted his melee weapon to be pretty substantive, and so I grabbed a Bowie knife because that's a dangerous thing to have on you.
Yeah, and the Bowie knife is not in the quick start guide, although it does list a number of those options here. But a Bowie knife is going to end up costing 230 coin. Again, that's quite a bit here. So that ends up leaving 87 coin left, I believe, for you. And let's go ahead and add that to your equipped weapons. Bowie knife. And a Bowie knife is going to be 1d8 plus your aptitude again. And it has the cool hemorrhage ability, which means if you hit someone, they have to make a health roll. Otherwise, they bleed out for a certain number of rounds. So they take an additional 3 damage each turn. So it allows you to deal a lot of damage in a short period of time, as long as you're able to hit someone with it. And it's a ranged weapon, so the default is 5 feet. Great. And did you grab anything else, or do you stop there with 87?
Oh, no. Heavy fabric armor is 75 coin.
Perfect. So that leaves you with 12, and we'll add that heavy fabric armor.
Oh,
here.
I don't think it's even that much. I think I have like 7 coin left.
Oh, is that my bad? Okay.
Yeah.
Mismath somewhere along the way. Heavy fabric armor, and that gives you how much for an armor bonus?
1.
Great.
Yeah,
and I'll equip that for it.
I think the idea when I was going into this is that Swifty doesn't have a lot of things, but the things he has are pretty nice and he takes care of them. Which is why I was willing, like, I could just grab a regular combat knife for 165 coin, but I don't know, it felt like if you're gonna get a knife, you want a knife, not like, so I think it was worth it to me. It was worth it to have a little bit extra oomph and not have, I'll leech off my friends and or take some more really dangerous warden things to supplement my income.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I forgot to add some things in the character sheet here, so I'm already filling them in as we go. But I don't know, I feel like that fits in with Swifty's character. Yeah, when you've got something, you make sure it's nice and you take care of it because you're holding on to it for some time. And it also makes sense with your bow, especially since it's your favorite weapon here. Maybe it has some sentimental value to you.
And so there are other things you can customize. I didn't do any of that, but I feel you can add customizations later. Is that correct? So
yeah, that's correct.
As I get more money, I can make my bow even more awesome, which is also kind of cool. Like, that's a thing I feel like Swifty would do, is like, once you get a thing, if you get a little bonus, you invest that in your equipment to make sure that it's top of the line, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to the very last step here, which is determining your backstory. If you're determining your backstory, we provide some information to help you think of what sort of things might be important for your character. We started with the character concept, and Swifty already had sort of an idea for it. Maybe the character creation process has helped Alex flesh out Swifty, but you can enter that in the backstory section. in your character sheet, either your physical character sheet or the one on Roll20 here. If you are starting as a character that's higher than level 1, please know that there is some information to help you determine some of those later level abilities, such as what skill proficiencies you gain during that time, whether or not you get mastery, which allows you to get a critical success on a roll of a natural 19, for example, in certain skills. Just increases that odd of success by a little bit more, 5%. And then also whether or not some of your basic attributes end up increasing along the way too. So all that information is saved in step 12, which again is optional only if you're going beyond level 1. So this is Swifty. Swifty is now ready to go kick some butt here and begin their first story. Although in this case, Swifty has already played a bunch with us. Alex, thank you for taking some time to share some of your decision-making process with Gideon Swifty Swift and helping us show how you fleshed him out as a character using the Backbone game system.
I hope it was coherent.
Me too. And for any of you who have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or reach out to us on Twitter at Backwards Games. So thank you all.